I'd like to call this Council and Budget Committee meeting to order. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are situated for this meeting and for those who are zooming in, we are on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to reside in the area and add to the diversity and richness of our community. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of Council are present, Your Worship.
There is no addendum this evening. Two announcements. The first relates to the passing of a former Town of Fort Erie Councillor, Darlene Hazlett. She served on the Town Council for, I believe, 3 terms in the late 80s and into the late 90s. She was engaged in a variety of community nonprofit endeavors, including the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, for which she used to come to these meetings at council and encourage us to bowl, in my case, make a fool of myself in public, and in Councillor McDermott's case, permit him to show how good a fundraiser he actually is. So Darlene comes from a large family. I grew up with many of her sisters and brother. A number of them still live in town, a number of them live elsewhere, but on behalf of the council, I want to extend our deepest condolences and our prayers to the family. Second thing I want to briefly mention, and I don't know that it's been made official yet. Councillor Dubanow was on this early in the morning. I think he heard the news coming out of Quebec that the restrictions on testing at the border are going to be lifted on Sunday. I think the announcement may be made on Friday, so that there will be a limitation, so that anyone who is leaving the country and coming back within 72 hours will not need to be tested. It will be those who have been outside the country for longer than 72 hours. That is not official, and I think we all best wait for the government to announce that. And I understand as well that there may be a change in the type of testing that would be required, which would make it easier. Okay, having gotten that out of the way, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 this evening. The first is in the capital budget package, EJFB 22, the EJ Freeland Center building envelope repairs, and also same number, the EJ Freeland Center pool repairs, as the company I work for is a contractor for the Boys and Girls Club of Niagara.
Okay, and so when we go through the, Councillor McDermott, I know in the past we've gone through these project by project to hear comments or whatever, so when we vote on that, Councillor Dubanow, your declaration will be noted. Any others? If not, then we're going to go to the budget presentation, and I'm going to hand the chair over to you, Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Worship. We're happy to have Jonathan Jansen with us tonight to give us an overview of this budget, and I'm certain it's going to be stellar, as always. Jonathan?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I cannot hear Jonathan.
No, me neither.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now that his microphone has been turned on.
Thank you. All right, thank you and welcome to our first budget and committee meeting for 2022. We did bring forward the budget planning and timetable report back on October 4th, which laid out some of the forecasts and pressures for this coming year. That was available at that point. The presentation tonight for capital follows very much in line with that of prior years. It's based on report CBC-01 2022, which is available on the town's website as well in the e-agenda section, as is the presentation that we're viewing tonight that is available under the town's governments, then budgets and finances, then budget information part of our webpage, should anyone wish to follow along. Hopefully we will have some joining us remotely as well. My information is on the last page of the presentation slide, should anyone wish to contact me. Our budget process is very much financial, but it is also a great opportunity to think of the needs and wants of our community as a whole and to move council's strategic plans forward. I always appreciate the invocation we say at the beginning of our meetings, which says we wish to be good stewards of all that's been entrusted to us, and that's certainly a goal with our budget process. So unless there's any other questions, we will begin. Tonight's agenda is presented here in 6 parts. I often say at the beginning of our budget process as well is we want to be sufficiently detailed and yet easy to understand and summarized. So hopefully we will find that mix again with this year's budget. But as always, that's a tall order. So do please ask any questions you may have for yourself or even on behalf of others in better understanding the budget. You've been through this budget now a few times, so it is not something that is easy to understand for everyone though. And again, these budgets, they are provided or prepared by staff, but these are our budgets. These are the budgets of our community. So we'll begin with that in mind. So just an overview of some inputs and drivers. Council's strat plan is front and center with what we bring forward for our budget. There's many connections in our strat plan with the budget. A number of the priorities and objectives touch on the budget. I did mention a couple separately last year, but this year I was going to note priority number 3, which is attracting interest and investment, which is something we do with many of our grant funding initiatives that we pursue. Another is priority number 4, which is promoting business, economic growth, and employment opportunities, and that is certainly part of our budgets as well. Most notably this year, we have a capital project for our Sunset Industrial Lands, just another way to move forward that initiative. The noted here on this slide is that our year-round budget, it's a year-round budget cycle and processes. The planning, we take an extensive amount of information to compile and review together as senior staff to recommend the capital projects that you will be reviewing tonight. Approvals are then followed with the bylaws that relate to the budgets. As well, throughout the year, we are approving tender awards and different awards related to the budget when needed in accordance with our purchasing bylaw. Executing, we're implementing these programs with our procurement process, which begins, and some of them would have already began in some way for this year's budget. But staff then throughout the year are executing these projects, managing them, and making sure they were successful. And then lastly, they're evaluating. We do a considerable amount of monitoring and reporting on our assets. We give an update to council with our second quarter report. Twice a year, we have a capital variance report that will capitalize assets and close them out, along with any surpluses or deficits to the related funding sources. So something that definitely is year-round and council sees in all months of the year. Just some context and scope. We have asset values in our financial statements of $377 million. That's the historical cost. We've noted before, just the core infrastructure assets alone, our asset management plan has said those are in excess of $1 billion for replacement costs. So an extensive network of assets. And the last bullet there is that these proposals that through the planning process are coming forward. And just to highlight some of the factors that are behind these, one is leveraging grants and contributions externally, making sure that's another strategic item that we are maximizing all available funds to the town beyond our taxes and rates of our water and wastewater budgets, minimizing the life cycle maintenance and the risks and costs to taxpayers, mindful of modernization and ways we can deliver our asset programs, as well as addressing levels of service. We look annually at our road conditions and other conditions of our asset to make sure we're meeting our set targets, as well as creating economic opportunity. The asset management plan was brought forward in 2019, and that is the most significant and central part to this capital budget. It brings together all our master plans and our condition data. The provincial regulation, it's noted there with a link, it's Ontario Regulation 588. That has driven a lot of the changes and a lot of our program plans for our assets. That's something that the province has said as well. We'll have other implications down the road with long-term requirements for funding and so on. And then just a note there, at the bottom, the funding strategy for sustaining our investments this year is based on a base reserve transfer to our reserves of $12.3 million. We are proposing inflationary increases, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, of $420,000. We're making some strategic increases to address our known financing gaps this year with both our wastewater and our bridges. And all this is in the context of what we set out with our reserve policy and targets. This is a couple images from the last asset management plan update that was presented to council in July of this last year. The diagram on the left shows the core elements of our asset management plan and strategies. And the figure on the right, it was table 1 from the report, and that's the infrastructure report card by service category, and that shows the confidence and performance data. That's not a reflection necessarily of where we're at in our condition or levels of service, but that is an indication of our goal to enhance the data that we have to make our capital budget decisions. I usually do an update on some of the key master plans that we have. This last year, we would have brought forward a few there. The bridge and culvert assessment, which is biannually completed. The corporate software review from June of this last year outlined a number of important aims and goals with our corporate software and ways that we can provide better customer service internally and externally to move us forward, and the road condition assessment as well. The bridge and culvert assessment, for example, did identify some funding gaps that I just mentioned, and we'll see those later on. The DC study has been with us. The current one was approved early in 2019, and that guides the program for new and or growth asset development. And then just lastly, it's also provided in consultation with a number of external partners, whether that be the region or with the province. At times we work with the library in providing some capital funding as well, and community groups and developers as well. So moving to the total dollars for this year's budget, it is $23.4 million worth of requests. That's over 55 projects. This is Table 1 in the report, as well as Appendix 1 and 2. That's where you'll see the details of the various capital projects. This is for both levy supported and water and wastewater supported. The water and wastewater you see at the top there is the 6 and 13% respectively, and the others are all levy funded. And the largest share is our core infrastructure, which is the storms and drains, the roads, bridges, sidewalks, and transit. And those would be the key core infrastructure that consume most of the budget. Just to highlight some of the major items being brought forward this year, for our existing assets, so these are items that are in our asset management plan, it's $20.1 million, which is 86% of that $23.4 million. And here you can see the largest this year being $3.486 million for the Idlewild Sanitary Sewer Works, $3 million for the Waverly Beach Trail, $2.86 million for the Bridgewood District streetscape improvements, and so on. Those account for a large portion of of this year's budget. And then on the growth or new asset side, it's $3.3 million or 14%. This year, we are proposing the Sugar Bowl Park splash pad in that, which is the largest one, as well as a Hagee Avenue road extension and an asset and work order management system. On the financing side, in keeping with most years, the town reserves are the key funding source for our plan. Our financial indicators that the province provides notes the funding gaps typically with municipalities. The best way to address that is through predictable and through our ongoing base capital asset transfers. So that is our most relied upon source. This year, we'll discuss it in a bit, but with debentures is also being proposed for some items that are separate from our usual asset management plan. So reserves fund $14.4 million, or 62%, as you just saw in that pie graph. The available capital reserve balances for 2022 are estimated to be just over $27 million. And as I mentioned, annual contributions we're giving from our budgets, from our operating budgets, is just over $12 million. The proposed 2022 capital budget and forecast relies on inflationary increases, but not the strategic increases I mentioned earlier. So those are the amounts that will be brought forward with the operating budget later in the process. And here's a graph showing the increase, the 5-year trend for reserve transfers. So this is good news. This puts us in a healthy, sustainable, which is one of our objectives, position to fund these programs and to account and provide for the life cycle needs of our assets. Council has done a lot of hard work. I want to give you lots of credit for getting us to the point where we can rely on these funds, and we've been able to keep a number of our other source needs like debt low over the years because of that. The proposed 2022 increase is from a low on the left of 2017 of 9.6 million to just over 12 million for the current year. The capital reserve balances are forecasted based on our 10-year plan. With all the current capital forecasts, we're showing variation over the 10 years, but generally sustaining those levels, and in some cases seeing growth over that term. It's for both our core and non-core that are separated out in that graph, and the part of what we would expect in some of those later years is that our plan would get refined, and as more information is known, we're better able to tackle some of the projects that may otherwise be deferred to some of the later years. So financing, looking at debt, this slide is for what was previously approved by council. We brought forward a proposal for the fire station amalgamation, fire station number 4, and brought forward some amendments early in 2021 regarding that. That is a project that's already in works. And we would approve the related debt for that project at the end of the project or as the construction is complete. The current budget for that is just over $4 million. The implications for 2022 on the operating side is $54,000 in interest, and once that becomes full payments in the future, that would be $454,000 a year thereafter in principal and interest. Just a note on that one, we do have our existing central fire station that was built also with debt, and the debt on that expires at the end of 2023. So rather than having our levy fund the debt for 2 years combined, because it would be potentially the 1 year together where we would have both debts, we will finance the expiring debt for 1 year with our reserves, just so we're not adding on to our levy temporarily. The 21 year-end balance is an estimated $4.7 million, and the budget for this coming year for all this existing debt is principal payments of $839,000 and interest of $193,000. That takes us to debt that's being proposed in this year's capital budget. This relates to, as I mentioned, items that are incremental to our asset management plan and forecasts. So these are proposed with either 15 or 20-year terms for debt. This takes advantage of a low rate environment we're in and our high debt capacity that we have right now. Our past discipline has allowed us, by having strong capital reserves, to have that capacity, and we'll see in the graph in a moment where we are and where this puts us. But to note some of these, the Bridgeburg District streetscape improvements, that's debt of $2.1 million over 15 years. This project takes advantage of some external federal funding through the Canada Community Revitalization Program. So that is $750,000, and the remaining portion, because this is advancing a project that would otherwise not have been in our asset management plan at this time. So that is proposed with debt. The levy impacts for each of these are shown below by year. So none of these items, based on approving the debt until after completion, are affecting 2022 budget. But, and you'll note the table in your capital report as well, does separate out the levy impacts by year going forward for moving forward with these. The debt balances for the past 2 years, you can see at the far left there, is declining to that $4.7 million. This is quite low in terms of the way the province and we compare ourselves with others. For that graph in 2021, it's just under 2% of our own source revenues. The province limits that debt for a municipality to 25%, which of course that is very low compared to that. And as well, anything less than 5% is deemed low risk for the financial indicators that the province looks at. So it's very low compared within our region and provincially as well. For the forecast period, if we were to apply all of the debt that is included in this proposed budget, that debt would increase to approximately 3% of our own source revenues. Here you're seeing the debt balances, but if you look at the debt annual charges, it's only bringing it from about 1.9 to just over 3%, which again is quite low compared to many other areas. So just to highlight some of the other financing sources, we have the Canada Community Building Fund, which is previously called the federal gas tax. That was renamed this last year. We're proposing $1.6 million of that to be used for this program, or 7% of all the funding. That $973,000 is the amount we're expected to receive from the federal government in 2022. We're applying that across 3 projects. $200,000 to road resurfacing, $650,000 to our bridge and culvert program, and $750,000 to the Waverly Beach Trail reconstruction. DCs are $1.15 million, or 5%, and the last one there is grants of $1.75 million, or 7%. And as I mentioned, for the Bridgeburg program, that $750,000 is being applied to that. And we've also included $1 million of OSIF, which is the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund grants. That's being applied to the Idlewild project for this year. The $1 million, and I'll mention this in the opportunities later, but we expect that should be announced as higher when we know that. The 10-year forecast period has an average spend of $17.3 million over the 2022 year and the 10 years that follows. It does fluctuate, again, due to the timing of different priorities. This will be refined and used. It'll smooth out in a sense as we move along. That's been our experience. It goes from a low of $11.7 million in 2027 to a high of $23.4 in 2029. So the recommendations in the report are to approve a preliminary approvals, and those are the items that can go quickest and without the need for the levy contributions this year to do so. That's for $7,466,500. That's the total that you'll see in Appendix 1 to the report. We are, since we produced the report, we are suggesting that the $3 million Waverly Beach Trail project be transferred over to the preliminary amounts to help move that project forward sooner. So that would amend the preliminary amount to the $10 million. That would come forward on December 13th to council. And then the general approval, that one would revise from the $15.9 million in Appendix 2 to the $12.9 by moving the $3 million to the other part. Some of the risks to know with this budget, inflation has been a key topic in our country, in our world. The current environment is volatile and, as you may know, has been exceptionally high. When we brought forward budget planning, at that point, it was 3.5% for the 12 months ending in July. Since then, we've seen higher rates. I think the most recent was 4.4%. Those, however, are all for consumer price indexes, which we do use. The more relevant indices are the construction ones, and the most recent one for the third quarter it was 12%. That's the same rate that the region and the town use in our DC bylaw for those receipts. So as you can see, and as you may know personally, if you had planned to build a deck before the pandemic, you're certainly needing a lot more than 12% likely now than you would have before. So there's lots of pressure in the construction areas on prices that we see. We are, however, proposing only the 3.5%. And with that risk, we are suggesting that in future years, we'll look at to see how the longer term, so the 24, the 36-month indexes look to see if we should be adjusting our asset management plan and the inflationary amounts in future years to account for that. The operating budget impacts, so all of the projects that we're bringing forward, or not all of them, some of them would have impacts for the operating. There's a total of $98,000 for those. Some of these include wages, materials. There are some savings as well, but the largest is for amortization. In fact, 90,000 of the 99 there is a policy we have that if we're adding a new asset, then we're ultimately planning for the replacement of that asset by funding the related amortization. CCBF, that's the Canada Community Building Fund, or previously the federal gas tax. We note that one because that has been a key source, but that agreement, we have no information beyond 2023 for that. The asset management plan and all of our underlying master plans and assessments really, as you saw in the report card earlier, we're still lacking some condition information. So that will change our approach, and that's a risk, potentially an opportunity if we find our condition is better than we had hoped, but certainly that is a risk. As well related to that, a lot of our asset management plan initiatives and those that are being guided as well by the Ontario regulations will have software and staffing impacts related to those as well. And then the last one there is just unusual, extraordinary events, as we've seen with the storm. We had the extreme storm on Halloween of 2019, as well as some flooding issues and storms in recent months and years. That will continue to be a risk to our asset plan. Opportunities, we do are always, as a grants oversight team at the town, looking to leverage as much external funding as we can from the federal, provincial, regional governments, and anywhere else we can. We currently have an application for the Community Building Fund for our splash pad. We look closely annually at the regional CSO, or Combined Sewer Overflow Program, to apply for as many relevant items as we can there. And then again, the OSIF formula-based. The opportunity, just to note with the OSIF grant, we've included the $1 million. The Provincial Economic Development or Provincial Economic Update that was released a week or two ago did note that the OSIF fund, the pot of monies, would double for this year. So we're not sure of what the specific allocations for the town would be, but certainly we expect it to be more. Last year during the capital budget, we didn't bring any forward at that point because there was no indication. So later we brought forward amendments. In fact, I think it was with our levy budget to recognize and to substitute all the funding we were announced to capture that. The MDRA claim, the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance, that's related to the October 31st, 2019 storm. We've had frequent contact with the ministry to move that process along, and we are waiting on that announcement. Debt, as an opportunity, certainly we're using debt funds this year, but we do have generally a continued low reliance on debt for our existing asset management plan. So that does allow us the opportunity to use that room even when we move to just about 3%. It still has good room should other needs arise or opportunities emerge, like the Bridgebird District streetscape improvements this year. And then again, just some operating budget impacts as well that can be on the favorable side with efficiencies, with newer technology, and so on. Some key messages, just to wrap up what's been presented. It is a capital program of $23.4 million. The combined forecast periods is for a total of $190 million. That's the total 11-year forecast. Funding is available primarily through capital reserves, which is transferred annually from our levy and rate budgets. Our capital funding gap, we're in a relatively good space for that. 2022 is in fact the last of the strategic increases that was identified in 2019 with our asset management plan, which is $70,000 for wastewater. So we'll continue to reassess and look at conditions of those to refine those gaps, but that it represents the last of that asset management plan recommendations. And then lastly, just some of the operating impacts that we just discussed. So the next steps in our calendar are listed here for the capital budget. The preliminary approval for the just over $10 million would be on December 13th, and the $12 million in general approval would come following the levy on February 28th. We do have our water, wastewater, and user fees on December 8th with related bylaws, and then we have our meetings early in February for the general levy budget. So that completes this portion of the 2022 capital budget. I'll stop here for any presentation questions. In the slides that follow, as well as what's online, we do have all of the individual worksheets. There are also section 4 that was sent out to council, should you wish to follow along with that. And that's it. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions of Mr. Jansen's presentation? Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jonathan, thank you very much. Can you just go back to slide 7? And I guess my question is more in regards to the storms and drains, 5%. When I was looking through the report that you had, I tried to read and understand the Ontario Regulation 588/17, asset management plan and stuff.
Yep.
So this 5%, are we putting more money in to storms and drains in regards to this here policy? They talk about mitigating climate change. So have we done that in this budget? And does this 5% include increases to mitigate? Because I think we have to do that in our asset management plan, right?
That's right.
And we have done that?
Yeah, so some of the things we're doing, it does follow, our asset management plan does address storm. One of the things we're doing right now that we're spending some of the most money on in our operating plan is to do better condition assessments on our storms, and that will in the future guide that plan as well. We have extensive network of drains as well in the town, so those do come and go with budgets. But storms, I know we're spending over $200,000 a year over the next number of years to increase the data. That's one of the areas you'll see in our report card that has lower confidence in the data we have. So as we build that data, we'll be able to expand that program.
Okay, thank you.
Any, Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. To you, to Jonathan. Jonathan, thank you for your wonderful presentation, and you do make it very understandable, and I appreciate that. In regards to I just wanted to clarify if I understood this correctly. The levy of 2022 is not going to be affected very much by the Bridgeburg improvement of the whole Waverly Beach and Point Abano. Is that because in 2022 we're going to be working on the design portion and the actual, shovel in the ground type stuff is going to happen in the years following?
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Councillor Noyes. Our practice is we approve the financing source as debt at this point, but we would not issue and get that debt for the town until after construction. So once our final costs are known, all available funding, in this case, for two of those three, a large portion would be still awaiting based on the municipal disaster. So certainly that gives us a lot of time to yet figure out and confirm some of those funding sources. But you're right, because of the timing, design is, I know the Waverly Beach Trail, for example, that's why we're moving that $3 million to preliminary, so that we can start on that design right away. But in both of those, in case of items 1 and 2 on the slide for the new debt, the actual full principal payments wouldn't actually begin until 2024. There's some small amounts in 2023 related to beginning to accrue debt, but interest, but not until 2024 fully.
Thank you.
Your Worship?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comprehensive report. I just wanted to start where Councillor Noyes ended, and that is the Waverly Beach Trail reconstruction. My understanding was that we were trying to target construction in 2022, which is next year. And so if we get the design work started early, we will have budgeted sufficient money to provide for the construction. So then I think what you're saying, and I may be misunderstanding it, the actual costs that we would have to start repaying wouldn't begin to accrue until 2023 with full impacts in 2024. And we at this stage don't really know what the full amount we will have to borrow, because we're still waiting to hear from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing relative to our Municipal Disaster Relief Act application.
Correct. Yeah, and Infrastructure Services may wish to speak to this a bit more, but on page 107 of when we get to the capital worksheets, in the attributes section, we do have a projected estimated completion date for that project of May of 2023. So I'm sure that we'll be looking to make that those changes and those works done as soon as possible, but I think that's the realistic date we've targeted. So in that case, the debt wouldn't be issued until the months following that, early in 2023, with full payments beginning in 24.
Right, and I don't think I have to remind anyone how important that particular walkway is and how many messages we've received over the past 2 years. And I know that we've been waiting to hear from the provincial government regarding our application, because we didn't really want to start work and let them off the hook. I did have a conversation with the minister a week ago, Monday, and I'm expecting that we will hear something by next month. And that gets me to my next question. After I reaffirm how important I think it is that we start on this project next year, 2022. If we receive any funding under the MDRA application, how is that? That's obviously going to be for specific projects that have been identified, 2 of which show on this slide: Waverly Beach Trail reconstruction, Point Abano Road South reinstatement. All of the debt for Point Abano Road would be financed. A great deal of the debt for Waverly Beach would be financed through debentures as well. So presumably, if we receive disaster relief funding for either of those projects, or hopefully both, that would reduce the amount that we would have to borrow?
That's correct.
And it would So staff wouldn't be coming forward and saying, okay, now that we don't need this money here, we're going to use it over here someplace else.
That's correct.
Correct? We're not going to be, you're not going to be switching and baiting.
Right. We don't anticipate it. We are, we're identifying debt specifically for these projects as they fall outside of our regular asset management plan forecasts. So we would not aim to include this debt for other projects that have existing funding sources identified.
And if I might, Chair.
Okay.
So now that we've got that clear, that this would, any money we get from the provincial government would be a direct benefit to our taxpayers, because that would reduce our obligation to need to borrow, which would reduce the ongoing future operating costs that debt would have on our levy. With respect to Waverly Beach, there is a component that would come from the gas tax. Again, if we were so fortunate to get more than what is proposed for debt debenture, we would be able to reduce the amount that would be allocated from the gas tax revenues, correct?
That's right. And we have the federal gas tax program, or what's now the Canada Community Building Fund. We're allowed a certain number of years to use the funding, so even there's not an issue with us needing to use it within that time frame. There's a rolling available use of those funds as well, so we could redirect that to something else.
Okay. And then if I might share, just on the final item, we had a report here before Council and Committee a couple of weeks ago regarding the Point Abano Road reconstruction. We approved the design work, so that's going to move forward. But the report actually said that the project is scheduled to be constructed in 2022. And this now says construction actually 2023, not to probably be finished until 2024. Can we get some clarity on that? Because I think that particularly if we do receive any funding from the provincial government, I think we ought to be accelerating that as well.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Both Waverly and Point Abano will be ASAP. As soon as the design is done, we're going to hit the market.
Okay, so then that would have some impact perhaps on the budgeting here, because if we proceed with Point Abano Road reconstruction, the debt may be payable there may be some payable in 2023, not 2024, if we don't get any money from the provincial government.
Right. In this case, we could delay the issue of the debt to the next year. We usually take advantage at certain times of the year with Infrastructure Ontario on debt like this, but there's a couple ways we could approach that. We could either delay the issuance of the debt to the budget year, or bite the bullet in 2023 and begin that debt as well.
Which kind of leads into if I'm sorry, Chair, I thought I was done. But I remember a conversation that Mr. Jansen and I were having, and the flow back and forth with her and also Ms. Griffin in his office about the borrowing. And we have reserves, we have some debt, we have investments, we invest the reserves. Some of those are high yield, we do very well on them, but we've got caps on how much we can borrow or how much we can put in those investments. And then we've got a bunch of other investments that are lower yield. And I had raised the question with you, what about borrowing from ourselves? What about, and you've simply suggested that if we were to proceed with Point Abano Road South, we would finance some of that initially by using reserves, which we would repay when we debentured. I think that's what you were telling us.
Yeah.
So what about the possibility of simply borrowing for 10 years against some of our lower yielding reserves and actually generating as much or more of a return on that investment and paying the interest to ourselves as opposed to a bank?
Mr. Jensen?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor. No, it's a good comment and something we did look at. In the shorter term, that's something we could accommodate so that we're avoiding levy impacts. For every dollar that we don't issue in debt, if our if our estimates are correct, that we can generally earn more on incremental dollars to our reserve investments than with debt. If we were to borrow over longer terms, we think we would be leaving money on the table with comparing our investment returns with the rates of debt. So that would, in the shorter term, we could accommodate that and avoid fluctuations, somewhat like we're doing this year, even with our fire debt, where we have an overlap of 1 year with an expiring debt and a new debt, where we're going to use one-time reserve funds to do that. Similar kind of scenario with this, where we could push it off, but then otherwise we're talking of 10, 15, or 20 years of the difference in those returns affecting our levy.
So for I guess in a nutshell, if we're borrowing long-term, and we think we're heading into a time when inflation will affect both the cost of borrowing and the return on investments, we're better to borrow now at a lower rate and bank on getting higher returns as we go along.
That is what we're proposing. Of course, there are risks to the rate environment, as we've often noted, but that is the proposal. Yep.
And I'm very comfortable with both you and Ms. Griffin. You've been very, I think, prescient in predicting where we're heading, and you've been very good in terms of investing our money. It's almost as if the money was yours and you're squirreling it away, and that's the highest compliment I think anyone can pay an accountant or a bookkeeper or a treasurer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question, and it's with respect to the slide on page 14. And it was regarding the fire station number 4 and the expected price tag of 4.5 or 4.05. But I was just wondering, is that lessened by the potential sales of the 2 locations, or is that without the sales of the 2 locations? So will it be impacted by the sale?
Mr. Jansen?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Butler. The report that we brought forward, I think it was early in February, did increase the debt portion in relation to the overall project. We are relying on land sales as part of that financing strategy. I believe we increased it based on a land appraisal we had at that point to just over $700,000. Should the town be successful in getting more land proceeds sales, that would reduce that $4 million in debt. Yes, we have the few other sources we have are development charges, as well as the fire station reserve contributing to that project. But we would ideally be reducing the debt component, as that's the portion that was bearing almost all of the increase otherwise for that increased cost.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are there any further questions of Mr. Jansen? Okay. Then we'll move on to the meat of the act. So this is going to be no different than any other time. We'll go through these one by one. If there's no questions, we'll consider it good to go. And if there are questions, we'll sit there and figure it out and deal with it at the time. So we'll start out with the photocopier replacement, 2022, $16,000. And to go to the next one, which is the IT upgrades and replacements for $78,500. Okay, and this is more communication upgrades and replacements for $17,000. And to replace corporate-wide core infrastructure associated with town's main network for $16,000. to replace fuel monitoring system, $10,000. Waterfront and park accessibility improvements, 2022, $35,000. Supply and installation, $30,983. Parkland reserve, $40,17. Development charge reserve. Parks and Recreation ID 3213. Move on to the park accessibility improvements. $75,000. Questions? No. Thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. This is something I brought up, I think, back in September or August, and I was concerned about the backstop being removed from A.C. Douglas Park. It was one that I understand the community was well used. And I was a bit concerned, like I kind of wanted it done earlier, because I was a bit concerned if we didn't start looking at procurement with all the problems with supply and demand, so to speak, we wouldn't be getting it done till late in the year of 2022. So I was hoping, and then we agreed, or I agreed, and everybody agreed, that we would defer it to this budget. I'm just wondering, I see in the, when you're going through the tables, that we're not anticipating this until July 2022, and I don't know what that July 2022 is just a date that, you know, we had to put something down, or if we're going to, I understood that once the capital budget was approved, we would try to start procuring some of these things early in the process and hopefully have it in for the spring of 2022. That's what I kind of recall about the conversation, and I don't know if Mr. Walsh can weigh in on that. Or Kira.
Kira?
I
Kira?
saw her.
She was here.
She was here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was here. Actually, Ms. Hansen's going to take that question.
You did a disappearing act.
And Ms. Hansen's going to take that question.
I could answer that question, Councillor Noyes. The intent is that when this is approved, that we will start the solicitation process. I guess we will start to do research on different options and prepare the tender documents and get that out as early in the new year as possible. So despite the fact that we say July in here, I anticipate that it will be sort of late spring likely, because the ground will have to dry up and whatnot for us to get in there and do the installation work. So we are aiming that it's available for the summer season.
Thanks for that explanation. I just saw the July 2022, and I'm thinking we were hoping for spring, probably late spring, but we were hoping for spring when I brought it up back in August or September. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then we'll move on to Bay Beach storm repairs. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question would be to Signe. I know I mentioned the Bay Beach repairs earlier this year, and I was under the impression that they were going to be done this fall. And now I see they're in next year's budget. So when can we expect these repairs to be done? Will they be done by the end of the summer?
Ms. Hansen?
Councillor Lubberts, our intent is to be able to start this work in the spring, and if there is work that we can do over the winter, that we will do it over this winter. I do have the construction drawings at this point, and we are about to submit an application to the MPCA for a work permit, so we are moving ahead. And we do have the construction drawings prepared, and once we get the necessary approvals and permits, we will proceed with tendering the work. And if there are things that can be done over the winter, and it's better to do over the winter, we will take advantage of that. Otherwise, the intent is to do it in the spring and have it all complete by the beach season of 2022.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. And then move on to the next, which is the Bowen Road Park improvements. Our playground replacement at $100,000. Moving on. For the Douglas Park revitalization at $1,900,000. Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I'm very happy to see this included in the capital budget here. This is going to be almost an anchor park for that neighborhood right along Birdie Street there near the hospital. I'm very excited to see this happening, and I'm glad to see this here, and certainly pleased to see this going out there. So I just wanted to make that quick comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on that? We'll move to the next, which is the neighborhood park enhancements for $40,000. Move on to the next. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Yes, thank you very much. Just out of curiosity, I know we label our parks different. There's different categories of parks, neighborhood parks, community parks. So does this cover all parks or just neighborhood parks? And
Ms.
just
Hanson?
to refresh my memory, what is a neighborhood park considered?
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Chair, this applies to neighborhood parks. It was identified in the Parks and Open Space Master Plan that this funding was specific to neighborhood parks. We have far more neighborhood parks than any other category of parks, so it was keeping those smaller parks well serviced and serviced at a consistent level. Having said that, if a memorial bench, because it does identify that part of this funding supports the memorial bench program, if there is a request for a memorial bench in a community park or a specialized park, we would use this funding to support that.
Yeah, I think the second part of my question was, what is a neighborhood park? Just for, I forget what a neighborhood park is. The
A neighborhood park. Yeah. So the intent of a neighborhood park is that it is located within a walkable or bikeable distance from every resident in an urban area. So they're smaller parks. They have fewer amenities. The basic amenities would be a playground and trees, seating areas, a pathway, and a shade structure. So they're smaller, more basic parks that serve a basic need in local neighborhoods for the most part. And then we move up to community parks, which will be more likely to have sports fields and courts and whatnot, and serve a broader community. And I think it serves a radius of about 1 to 1.5 kilometers.
So these enhancements include the larger parks?
They're aimed at they're aimed at the smaller parks, but if there are memorial benches that are requested in the larger parks, we will accommodate that through this fund as well.
Okay.
Okay, so now we'll deal with History Happened Here pilot program. Your Worship?
Yeah, I just wondering, we approved this, I think, the initiative maybe earlier this month or last month. I'm just wondering what the process was to come up with the design for the markers that would be highlighting the events or the name.
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the process to come up with the design or the process to come up with the content on the signs? Just to clarify the question.
The design.
Okay. So the process that we went through to come up with the design was we engaged a graphic designer. The museum curator and myself developed the criteria that was provided in the report that went to council in October. And this is they came up with a number of different design options. And then a committee of staff members reviewed the options and identified the preferred option. And then we brought that to council in the report on October the 4th.
Yeah, that was my recollection. Thank you.
Councillor Noyes.
My questions go along the same as Mayor Redekop. Perhaps my inference is a bit different. I thought when we saw this before us in council, this wasn't a set-in-stone design. It was a suggestion that it may look something like this. I can remember Councillor Lubberts saying it's quite unique. And I do think it's quite unique, but it's not very functional. And that's my concern. If you're looking at the pictures right now, you're going to have to read at knee level some of the writing. 2/3 of the design is wood. 1/3 is actually information. From a functionality point of view, this would not have gotten a lot of brownie points. And I'm thinking and I'm not speaking, we have not discussed it at the accessibility level either. This has not even gone before the committee. Not that it has to, I'm just saying, I'm thinking, because I worked with, was a therapist for many years, although I like the design, I think it's neat, but from a functional point of view, I think there's a lot of room for improvement to improve the functionality, and that's just my comment. Again, you stand up and you see if you can read something at knee level, and with that small font. So those are just my thoughts. I don't know if it's already a done deal. I don't know, but I think there could be room for improvement.
Ms. Hanson, could you speak to that a little more?
Yep. And it might just be the way it's presented on this slide. I do have a full-size mock-up on the wall in my office, and we did that to confirm that it did meet all AODA standards, which it does. We kept tweaking the design until it did. So we feel comfortable and confident that it does. I think it just might be a product of what you're seeing on this particular sketch that makes it look like the text is very, very small. But in the full-size mock-up that I do have, and I'd be happy to share that with you in some way. If you're in town hall, you can see that the text is quite legible. And we can, I don't think there would be an issue in modifying this design to raise the text up a little bit as well, if that was necessary.
Councillor Noyes?
And thank you, Ms. Hanson. And I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier. I thought this was kind of just a suggestion when it came in regards to the design itself. I will take you up on it and look at it. And I don't know when you're going to put nail it down, so to speak, but we are having an accessibility meeting. Everything that's written in the standards, if we can do better, I think we should, but perhaps the accessibility committee would like to look at this and probably maybe make some suggestions. And it may not be, like I said, it may look much better in real life than what I'm seeing on here, and it may not be an issue, but what I'm seeing, I have some concerns with. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would be happy, sorry.
Okay.
I can just respond to Councillor Noyes, as I would be happy to bring the mock-up to the next in-person accessibility committee.
Is that good for you, Councillor Noyes? Okay.
No, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lubberts?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Councillor Noyes was saying, I'm just wondering, what's the life cycle that we're expecting from these here signs? Because I know I see it's cedar that you're going to be working with, right?
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it has been recommended Western Red Cedar. I think that we would, to answer your question, anticipate a life cycle similar to our other signs that we might have in parks or along the Friendship Trail, which I'm guessing is probably about 15 years.
So that you figure the posts will will last as long as the plaque itself?
We did have a discussion about that, and we do feel it will. And one of the things that we are looking at to ensure that happens is putting a concrete base around the bottom so that we're not dealing with weed whippers or lawnmowers at the base of the sign that will erode the wood posts. But we did use Western red cedar just because of its durability. And it will age and fade, but we felt that was probably one of the better woods to use for this.
And I guess my last question is, when we install these, what I'm looking at here, I can see exactly what it is that we're celebrating. The history happened here. But in some instances, I would think that these here posts will be accessible from both sides. So are both sides going to be lettered the same if that's the case? And then if it's up against a building or in a garden, then you could only do it on, you only have to do it on one side. But if it's in a park setting, then you would have to have the writing on both sides. Is that what would happen?
Ms. Hanson? Through you, Mr. Chair, the intent is there would be no writing on the wood posts. However, on the plaque in the middle, on the back side, it would say history happened here. And on the front side, it would have the historic story that is being told along with the graphic. So there's always the intent that there would be text on both sides. If this was backed up against a wall, then we would obviously have to look at that because you wouldn't see the backside. But the way this was designed, the thought process was that it would be located along a pathway in a park or in a garden, like you said, and that it would be visible from both sides. Whether you're standing in the grass or on a pathway, you could see both sides.
Anything further, Councillor Lubberts? Then we'll move on to the next slide. Oaks Park ball diamond improvements. Any comments or questions? I just have one. Mr. Walsh, the lights are scheduled to be done when exactly? For the hardball diamond?
Signe, do you have that information handy?
I do not have information on exactly when in 2022 the intent is to install them.
Our goal,
okay.
Our goal there would be before summer.
Before summer?
Before, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? We'll move on to the next slide. Ridgeway North Park land acquisition. Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to figure out where this is. Ridge Road.
So,
Oh, that's the old elementary school?
Ms. Dolch?
It is near the old elementary school. It's actually part of the Royal Red Phase 2 subdivision. If you recall, that's where the 4-story apartment is going. And the parkland was to be purchased to form our North Park in Ridgeway.
And we're going to acquire this land? We're going to purchase it?
That's correct. It's above our 5%, so we do need to acquire the remainder.
Have we confirmed this price? Because from my recollection of property prices in Fort Erie, a lot is worth about $200,000 now, $250,000. Or I think we're a little low at 150.
And so I can just explain a little bit of it, and Signe has a little more detailed calculation. But generally, this park size is less than an acre, and we did some comparison values, but we didn't get a formal appraisal yet. This is our guess, but Ms. Hanson may be able to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. The actual purchase is it's under half an acre. We're estimating an acre is costing about $250,000 right now. So the 150 allows us to purchase this piece of land at that value, and it does give a little bit of extra money for us to undertake an appraisal and legal fees on top of that. So if land prices don't double in the next year, we feel that we've left ourselves a bit of a buffer.
So let's put it this way: if 150,000, in my opinion, that's not going to cover it. But if it doesn't, is it going to be difficult for us to get another 50 or 75,000, or is it better to do it now? And if we don't use it, then we don't use it. That's my thought.
We can approach
50 is too low.
Yeah. I mean, we can approach it two ways. We could come back to council with a budget amendment if we find ourselves in that situation, or council may choose to allocate more tonight. And then if there's anything unused, it would go back into the reserve.
Okay, then I guess my next question would go to Mr. Jansen. You're okay with giving us money later? Because, he doesn't like to give any money away. So, Signe, you're in a tough spot here.
Mr. Jansen?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Lubberts. No, Signe's quite right. The funding source for this one is the Parkland Reserve. And I don't have my forecasts with me projecting the slides here right now, but generally we have healthy balances there, especially related to development recently. So I leave it with council's discretion.
Okay,
I'll give you the floor back in 1 second. So, Mr. Jansen, do you think it would be more prudent to bring this back as a budget amendment once we know what that possible price might be? I mean, if you're going to say yes to that, I think a budget amendment would probably be more in order.
Yeah, my preference would be to rely on staff's estimate at this point, and we can bring it back later if required.
Is that good with you, Councillor Lubberts?
Yeah, that's fine, and I'm just glad that I brought it up tonight, Signe, because now when we go to Jonathan, we'll be doing what he normally does, is soften the blow. So, Jonathan, be prepared.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next slide. Sugar Bowl Splash Pad. Your Worship.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of this, in particular in view of the fact that you and staff have been working with Fort Erie International Academy to try to get the utilization of the pool in the old Fort Erie High School, and I understand that is progressing, so that will provide a really good opportunity for the people in that area. I had a couple of questions, though, just with respect to, I had no idea splash pads were this expensive. Apparently that's a reflection of how much fun the children have, because they seem to have a lot of fun. There's a reference in the material here, in the worksheet, to the 2011 study that was conducted and what the costs of putting in a new pool or aquatic facility on $2010 was, which is $2.5 to $3.9 million. Have we had any update to those figures since then to get an idea of what it would cost if we were to embark down that trail?
Yes, Your Worship, we're prepared with that one. Ms. Hanson?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. We have not sought out updated detailed cost estimates for the concepts that were prepared in 2011. And one of those concepts was to replace the pool as it is right now, and the second concept was to replace it with a more elaborate aquatic facility that included a splash pad and different types of amenities. We have put some thought into what the equivalent prices would be in 2021 and done some research with respect to that. And what we determined was that between 2010 and 19, prices increased by about 40%. And as a result of COVID, we're seeing at least 40% increases in pricing. So the prices quoted in 2011 could be anywhere from 80 to 100% more than what was identified in 2011. So we could be looking potentially, if construction prices keep going up, we could be looking at double what was originally quoted in 2011.
Thank you. So that's an outdoor facility, which would only be utilized for part of the year, similar to a splash pad. And then the other question that I had, I know that we've got a photograph of the existing pool, and we had received some numbers earlier this year about what it would cost to try to get that pool operating again. And I know the worksheet says that it's end of life. Is it end of life with potential for any further resuscitation for any period of time? And if resuscitation for the short term is possible, do we have any idea what the costs might be?
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we know is damaged right now, we're looking at 150 to 200,000 to repair. That's only what we know. I have a fear that what we can't see under the concrete and under the pool may be damaged as well. So the 150 to 200 is a best guess. It can only go up from there. And that's a Band-Aid.
And so what is, if I might, Chair, then, if this splash pad is proceeding to be constructed, A, where would it be located, and B, or does A answer B, it would be located where the current pool is?
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the intent is to locate it in the vicinity of the existing pool. I think there would be a desire to maybe shift it a slight bit towards the splash pad, so it creates more play value where people using, sorry, not the splash pad, the playground, move it a bit closer to the playground so that those using the playground can go back and forth to the splash pad. But it will be in that general vicinity.
And the building itself, the change rooms or whatever, is that building usable at all in the future?
I'll refer that to Mr. Walsh. I think we were thinking that it would be coming down as well as the pool coming out, but I will refer that to Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is the plan, is to remove that.
Thank you.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to that thought about the change room buildings coming, or the existing change room building coming down. Do we envision that there would be a replacement for the families that come and utilize the splash pad? Would we be doing something perhaps smaller or something a little smaller scale if it's going to be a destination splash pad? I'm just wondering if there's going to be change room and washroom facilities there as well.
Mr. Walsh?
Okay.
I play volleyball. Signe?
Through Mr. Chair, we had not envisioned replacing the building with change rooms and washrooms. We had envisioned a shade structure of some sort, but not reconstructing washrooms for that price.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I can appreciate that. I'm just thinking to the type of location that it is. I think that's something perhaps we might want to consider going forward. I know we're budgeting for this right now, but it might be something that even we want to look at the numbers, perhaps even for the future at a later date to add on and start planning for it. If I may, Mr. Chair, just a quick comment about this project as well. I want to extend my appreciation to the staff and members of council, as well as Fort Erie International Academy, for working together to see if we can come up with that, almost this, I hate the word, but I'm going to use it, the synergy between the town and FIA to be able to utilize an existing pool facility. I had received a lot of calls from residents in Ward 2 and also in Ward 1 as well, who have family in Ward 2. That pool there and that facility, that park, is very special and very important to the residents in this end of town. And knowing that we're going to have, we have the E.J. Freeland Center, which has been brought in to the umbrella of the municipality. We lease it to the Boys and Girls Club. And to know that we have an opportunity to work with another partner as well, I think it speaks well to our staff and the municipality's ability to partner to find opportunities when they exist. And just to echo what the mayor said, I'm fully supportive of this and those Parks Oaks and the Sugar Bowl. I think that's a very special, very nice part of town, and I'm looking forward to seeing us continue to work on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I'm very much in favor of this. I think I mentioned to you earlier, I think I was on council when the first decision to close the Kinsman Pool was made, and so that's quite some time, even prior to 2011. So I'm happy to see this go, and I also can comment in regards to, in Stevensville, we had a pool, very small pool, but we had a nice pool. It was very well used, and there was a lot of concern, if the pool disappears, what are we going to do? And it was replaced with a splash pad. I will tell you, I have not heard one word about the pool that's no longer there. Most people don't even remember it. And the use, for those of us my age, we remember it. And now that I take my grandchildren to the splash pad, it's so much more enjoyed if that's so, and so many more kids are in the splash pad than they were in the pool where we had a lifeguard. So I think this will be really well received. My only concern is, I'm basing it on Councillor Dubanow, is I'm surprised there isn't a bathroom being planned for this. I'm not saying change room and everything else under the sun, but I think we might want to consider adding bathroom facilities to the splash pad, because this is a community park and it's a destination park, and I think we would be laxed at not including bathrooms in this facility, I think, in the 2022 budget. Thank you.
Is there anybody else around the table? Mayor Redekop. Oh, sorry. I didn't see his hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have to agree with Councillor Noyes. I'm just sitting here thinking about all the parks that we have in town. I go to Bay Beach, we got washrooms. I go to Waterfront Park, we got washrooms. We don't have any in Ridgeway, but it's Waverly Beach, we have washrooms. I think, Jonathan, I know you're going to hate me for this, but I think we should consider washrooms in this park, and we should consider in our future budgets that our larger parks, Stevensville, I know that right now they're using porta potties. Pardon me?
Which park?
Yeah, the ball diamonds, they're off Ott Road.
If I can intercede.
Yeah,
in the
so
other
I'm
here.
just, just thinking
we
that.
do have bathrooms in some of the parks. The ballpark has a bathroom. The one in Stevensville behind Memorial Park, there is a bathroom that we can use the library. Well, there's one at the back of the library type thing that we use. The porta potties are in River Trail.
Yeah, so I think that in future budgets, we should start putting washrooms in our major parks. And I think that this year, we should consider, if we're going to be down there doing construction let's do the construction. We're gonna have the ground dug up anyway. We could put some pipes in, and we can get a washroom facility.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to commend Councillor McDermott for advocating to save the pool for many years, and I know that this is a compromise to have a splash pad for him, so I wanted to thank him. But I do want to talk about washrooms because Ridgeway has been advocating for bathroom facilities for their park and for the downtown core for a long while, because it's the the passageway for the bike paths, and there's been a Johnny on the spot for many years. So while I appreciate there's going to be construction here in at the Sugar Bowl, and it makes perfect sense to put in washroom facilities while construction is being made, where does that leave Ridgeway?
Your Worship? Did you? Oh.
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yes.
Sorry, is that rhetorical, or
yes, it was.
Did you want a response from somebody?
Was that directed at Mr. Walsh?
I know. Well, I can appreciate Councillor Lubberts' suggestion to budget it in for the future years, but I think it's an unfair advantage when we're constructing a park in Ridgeway. And are there washroom facilities being constructed there? Because I don't think there are there? Maybe that question answered. No, I didn't think so. So I have difficulty giving, while I appreciate that the north end requires something more substantial, and I will support that, I have difficulty supporting it because Ridgeway has been advocating for it for many years as well. I'd like to see a solution for that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Your Worship?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, and I entirely agree with Councillor Lubberts' observation that when we're spending $1.5 million, $2 million, $3 million like we are at Crystal Ridge, we should be providing washroom facilities. And even if it's an area where there's a recreation trail, that would be helpful. This particular project hasn't started, and I don't think if we are short on one area, I don't think perpetuating the shortness of our thinking benefits anyone. My solution would be that, what is it, about $100,000 to put in a washroom? So how much does it cost to put in a washroom? For this particular facility, a washroom doesn't have to be something like we've got at Waverly Beach, but a washroom, it's functional and will meet the needs of the public. Would Mr. Walsh have an idea, or maybe Ms. Hanson?
I think Ms. Hanson has done a quick takeoff actually for the trail washroom. Thoughts?
Okay. Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have had discussions about washrooms in Ridgeway. As Councillor Butler knows, we've been looking for partnerships in Ridgeway. And through that process, we were contemplating, although we have not done it yet, of developing a standard washroom design that we could apply to various parks. And then we would have a firm cost of what a washroom would what we would be looking at to budget for a washroom. But I think that we would be looking in the $200,000 range for a washroom, considering we have to bring servicing to the washroom. It's not just a building, but we also have to service it. We have to ensure that it meets AODA standards and whatnot. So it will be a bit of a structure, and there will be servicing and various costs associated with that.
That's fair enough. So for this particular site, the Sugar Bowl, there already is plumbing that goes to the building. So that's not going to be an additional charge. My question, I note that we've applied for some community building fund monies. And if we receive those monies, what happens to the money that's been allocated to come from the Parkland Reserve and the contribution from reserves? Presumably that would be somewhat reduced so that there'd be money left in the reserve. Is that correct?
That is correct. The money, if we were to be successful with that application, the money, those monies would then go back into the reserve.
Right.
So the equivalent amount of money would go back into the reserves.
Any idea when you might hear, when the town might hear about the Community Building Fund application?
I am anticipating, they had indicated January. My experience is it might be a little later than that. They usually make the announcements a little later than we anticipated. So I'm expecting January, February.
Okay, I'd be inclined, Chair, to move that we increase the budget here by $200,000 to accommodate a washroom. That can be a provisional item, I suppose, or maybe we should just put it in. And then my thinking would be, if we're successful in the Community Building Fund application, that we look at putting in a washroom facility at the Crystal Ridge Park, because that is a very well-used park, and we've made major investments in that park. I think it's going to be over $3 million by the time we're done, and that there should be a washroom there. And if we don't get money from the Community Building Fund, then I think we contemplate putting in washrooms there, and we can continue to work with the business community and other parts of the community. But, you know, to have a $3.2 million park with no washroom facility, that I think is short-sighted. So I'd like to move that we amend this budget by increasing it by $200,000 with money from Parkland Reserve, and then we can see what happens with the Community Building Fund. And if we get money from that, I think then we look at doing something in Ridgeway at their park, Crystal Ridge Park, depending on where we are in terms of the year and the design that we would have to go and where it would be located. Has there even been a location in Crystal Ridge contemplated for future washrooms?
Is everybody okay with that amendment?
Can Ms. Hanson answer the question about the washrooms, whether there's a potential location at the Crystal Ridge Park?
Did you hear that, Ms. Hanson?
Yes, I did. And through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to Crystal Ridge Park, there are a number of washrooms in the adjacent buildings. We have 3 separate washrooms in the adjacent buildings. So our hope was that we could take advantage of those rather than constructing a new washroom. We did provide for porta potties within the park site. We have a number of locations for that with pads, and we had originally intended to install covers over them, but that was removed from the budget due to cost. So that has been the struggle at Crystal Ridge Park. Are there a number of washrooms on that site? And we were reluctant to incur more cost to construct another washroom. We do have porta potties though.
I understand that, but the reality is that the library is not always open, and Crystal Ridge Center, we don't control. It's controlled by the Crystal Ridge Community Center Corporation, and the arena isn't always open. So that, you know, it'd be great if we could use those. The library in the Sugar Bowl, the Centennial Library, it's not always open either. People could use that, and there's also a washroom over in Oaks Park, but that's some distance from the splash pad. So I'm thinking that we should be taking a bit more broad approach to making those facilities available. And I agree entirely with Councillor Lubberts. When we're planning these large parks, washroom facilities should be part of the park planning. So I move to amend this by $200,000, the money to come from the Parkland Reserve.
Before I ask for council support on that, I'm not seeing Councillor Butler on my screen for some reason.
Yeah, could we have her back?
Oh,
That's weird.
okay. I just wanted to make sure you were.
Yeah.
Before we do this, can I comment on, I haven't had a chance to. So I'm not really sure how some of my constituents are going to feel about the pool closing or no longer being there. Councillor Butler's correct. I've been a big supporter of the pool for, 1967. I was 15 years old and I had brown hair. And all I can say is some days, you can understand why people get attached to certain things in our community. When you drive down Central Avenue and it's a beautiful day out and the grass has all been done at the park and the pool has nothing but sparkling blue, it's the most majestic thing you can look at. And I know when the pool closed, because of the fact that we didn't know all about the damage that was there and the parts and stuff like that we needed and couldn't open it. I did get a lot of flack about that. And I've always been kind of thinking about whether or not, a splash pad was going to do the trick until I thought about whether or not we could make an agreement with the school to make sure that we did have a pool for children to swim in, not only for next year during construction, but for as long as they wanted to do it. So ordinarily, I would vote against something like this because of my attachment to the pool, but I have to learn to wean myself off of being so, sentimental. And, I'm sure that the pool at Pia is going to be just fine for people to swim. I tend to think, Your Worship, that once they get a look at this splash pad, that they might not want to use the pool after the second and third year of it being there. And maybe people don't know the size of the pool, but the biggest pool that we have here is at Crystal Ridge, and it's 1,650 square feet. And this pool, or this splash pad, is 6,000 square feet. And it's a beauty. So, I only have one question before we go to the amendment, and that's to Ms. Hanson with regards to public input with regards to the pool, with regards to the splash pad. I think it's very important that the public at the north end and in Ward 2, Ward 1 and 2, get the opportunity to comment on this, because I know that anytime big parks go on, there's a lot of public input into it. I just want to make sure that there is an opportunity for the general public to make comment, or I don't know how you do those things, but you're the magician there. I'm sure that you'll be able to get a good crowd out to talk about the splash pad and maybe make comments. But quite generally, you picked a very nice splash pad for the residents of Ward 1, and I will be supporting this tonight. And I'm grateful for council's support in our ward, and appreciate it a great deal. So before we go to the amendment, we'll go to Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's a comment on the amendment itself as well as the splash pad. You just held up the picture there of what's planned. I think it goes without saying that this will be a destination splash pad. And I wouldn't be surprised if we attract children and families from outside the municipality with a splash pad like that. I know that we have one at Safari Niagara here in town. Of course, you have to pay admission to the park, but that's a good-sized splash pad that attracts people to that. Something similar, I think it goes without saying that that's going to attract individuals to Fort Erie. And if you're coming here for the day with your kids to the splash pad, maybe you'll stop in at a restaurant, stop in at a local coffee shop, maybe grab a sandwich or a drink. There could be also an economic boost to that end of town as well. So I'm very supportive of it. Just to touch on the amendment that the mayor has proposed, and I'm fully supportive of it. Just more of a comment. I'm hoping as we go through this process and perhaps even come up with a standardized form of like a washroom design for our parks. We've had residents nearby the Douglas Park also express interest in a potential washroom there as well. And it wasn't included for budgetary reasons. I believe we're doing shielded porta potties right now. The residents have expressed an interest. There may be fundraising opportunities, things along those lines, perhaps even a future council, future budget, we might even include that. I'm just hoping that, as we go through for whatever happens at the Sugar Bowl as well as in Ridgeway, that if we do standardize a design, that this is something that we could perhaps even utilize in other parks as well, because I think it goes without saying, some of our larger, more destination parks, there's definitely an interest for washroom facilities. And but just to touch on that, I'm fully supportive of it. I think we do need washrooms at a splash pad of that magnitude and that nature. So thank you, Your Worship, for bringing that forward, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Clickett?
Yeah, I think I don't have any issues with adding the 200,000. I would just respectfully suggest that of the 200,000, that we take 90,000 from our development charges and 110,000 from the Parkland Reserve. Okay.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Councillor Noyes?
Again, going on the amendment, but it's not really on the floor yet. I'm hoping that when the amendment comes forward, that $200,000 is earmarked for the bathroom, that it doesn't kind of get lost if costs someplace else increase and something has to be cut, that it's not the bathroom, that the bathroom is a must. And I don't know if the amendment can refer to that increase in money to go towards a bathroom.
Your Worship?
Yeah, no, I think it's clear, and I think staff understands that the intention is that the budget is increased and that there'll be a washroom. And if it costs $197,000, the $3,000 goes back into reserves and development charges to be used for the next washroom in the next park.
Mr. Jansen, you're keeping track, right? Thank you. So all in favor of the amendment? Oh, just one second. Mr. Jansen?
Yeah, Chair. One thing I would caution is we're always looking at the related operating impacts. In this case, I think it's a good opportunity as any to look at some of those on screen. They're on the blue margin. For 2022, there's the $62,000, and for 2023, it would be $122,000. Those are itemized in the capital worksheet, but do keep in mind, as we do add on to projects like this, we are adding operating costs as well for future budgets. So, in this case, there are some significant costs, most especially for water, but added on projects like this do add as well to the operating.
Thank you. Councillor Lubberts, you have more?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm glad that the mayor is going to bring forward that amendment. But I just wanted to comment further on Councillor Butler's concerns about Ridgeway. And back my first term of council, they wanted to sell the building that was owned by the museum board across from South, what's the name of that restaurant there? Trailsides. And when it was up for proposals, I brought forward that we should make sure that we incorporate washrooms into that project. And that was rejected by the council of the day. And it never happened. And I knew that one day, we were going to pay for that, because here we are today. And those washrooms should have been in 10 years ago. And so that's why I'm saying, if we do this year, let's all make sure that in future years, or staff at least, because we might not be here next year or the following year, and staff keeps it in mind that, our major parks, they need washrooms. And so we should go through, the communities and, prioritize where they should be. But Ridgeway should be next on the list because it was requested 10 years ago.
Thank you. So do you, any more comment on that, or would you like to vote on that amendment? All in favor? Carried. So we'll move to the next one. Okay, so bunker gear for the fire department. Any comments or questions? Councillor Noyes.
I'm very much in favor of this. I just have a question, and I don't know if anybody here can answer it. I seem to recall that when we're no longer using the bunker gear, we do donate them to some place, and I'm just wondering if we have that information, or if I'm recalling incorrectly.
Mr. Cookett.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer. The chief isn't with us tonight. He's doing some training, but I will get that answer for you, and I'll share it with all council.
Thank you.
Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I guess I'll ask Mr. Cookett. Are we doing the same as we've been doing other years and partnering with the other municipalities to split the cost of the gear to get better pricing?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. Yeah, what we do is we procurement with the other municipalities to get a better price.
So moving on to the next. Protective equipment, $40,000. Moving on to the next. Bridgeburg streetscaping improvements. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I no doubt you'll probably be echoing similar comments. If you do, I'm very excited to see this happen, and the enhancement of our downtown cores within the greater Fort Erie area. You know, certainly we've seen what the enhanced streetscape has done for Ridge Road. I'm looking forward to seeing similar sort of growth and opportunity happen on the Jarvis Street core with this streetscape. I'm particularly excited about this, and certainly I'm glad to see it brought forward. I look forward to seeing it done, and all the neat, cool things that we're going to see happen in the North End once this is done. It goes a long way to confidence for people who want to set up a business, build an apartment, stuff like that. So we're putting our money where our mouth is to show that we have confidence in the Bridgeburg downtown core, and hopefully that confidence begets confidence. So I'm looking forward to this. Hope I didn't steal your thunder, Mr. Chair, but certainly thank you very much for the opportunity.
Anyone else? Councillor Lubberts?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, where's this starting and where's it ending? Is it just between Central and the Boulevard, or, because I see that it seems to be creeping further to the west, the downtown core?
The design included approximately 500 meters of Jarvis Street from 231 Jarvis to the Niagara Boulevard.
And 231 is which building?
Mr. Walsh, it's basically from Central to the Boulevard, is that correct?
Yeah, it's essentially Central down to the Boulevard.
Is that enough? Yeah. I don't want to leave the other people out, because I see that, I mean, if you go down there, I can see that, the limousine service is there, and then we have a few other businesses that have opened up, and they've done some facade work and everything, and I don't want them to feel like, they're not being included, because I would assume that they're in the Bridgeburg BIA area too as well, right?
They certainly are.
And they're being assessed for BIA.
And the plan was developed, this is the BIA's plan. The members of the people that run regional limo are very aware of the plan, and everybody seems to be pretty content with that. So, it was a plan that they put together, had an open house, and thought that maybe they might have to wait 14 years like Ridgeway did to get theirs done. And we're very fortunate that the funding has come forward for them, and that there's money available here, and that council supports them. I think it's going to be a catalyst for more business in the community. I know that there's one business down there ready to also put in $1 million into one of their buildings. So it's starting to get exciting, and I think when this gets done, I think a lot of investment will come back to the downtown, and that's what we're hoping for, and we appreciate everything council does for us. So
Okay, if that's the case, then I would...
Clarification, if I might, Chair. I just looked up 231 Jarvis Street. It's to the west of Central.
Okay, so 231 is what?
Well, it looks like it's, this says 231 is.
Would it be the,
It's across from the laundromat.
Okay,
oh, that
so
would
it
be like a
already covers
dentist
that.
office there?
Beg pardon?
There's a
covers-
dentist office there somewhere in there. And then I think it starts residential. Okay, that's fine,
Then it
because if
does
that's
cover
it, then, that,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So, any
Oh,
further comment?
If it isn't, Mr. Chair, then when, we need to let staff know that when, if it isn't going that far, when they get to Central, then they need to make sure that any infrastructure that is in the ground is set up so that if they want to extend the infrastructure, it's there and it's ready to extend further in the future.
Mr. Walsh? So, if 231 is basically just before the laundromat,
It's across the street.
or, beg your pardon?
It's across the street from the laundromat.
Across the street from the laundromat, which is just a little bit past regional limo,
Dentist office.
then you've already looked out at the works underneath, haven't you?
The works on Jarvis the underground works on Jarvis were completed, ironically, by me when I worked for Earth Tech back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So they're all in good shape. Trust me on that one.
I was feeling comfortable until then.
As long as he doesn't try to sell me a car after.
If I may clarify the scope, from my recollection, the work is from Central to the boulevard, not west of Central. The streetscaping. If I may, just a little further, we have the plans completed. They're ready to tender. I'd hate to go back and change them now. It would delay the project. But I will confirm with council the exact scope.
Chair, if I might.
Yes.
I mean, the worksheet says that the design goes from 231 Jarvis to Niagara Boulevard. So it would make sense if the BIA is involved, because one would think that they would want to make sure that all of their members would be able to take advantage of a revitalization of that area. If for some reason there is a problem, though, I agree with Councillor Lubberts, that should be brought back to our attention.
Anyone else? All in favor? Carried. We just voted on this because there was discussion, so. Next. So we have up in front of us the Elm Street water main. Any comments or questions? Moving on to the next. Peggy Avenue Extension. Mr. Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, just a quick question perhaps Mr. Walsh can answer. Right now, we have Crossroads Drive, which currently ends at Concession, and there's a median barrier down the middle of Concession Road, which only allows right turns in and right turns out from Crossroads onto Concession. I'm just wondering, I know from the area, just looking at it, it almost looks like Crossroads and Hagee line up. I'm just wondering if, as part of this extension, if we're going to be constructing a proper full four-way intersection aligned with Crossroads, or if they're both going to be kind of their own right in, right out roads with the medium barrier down the middle. I'm just thinking of this going forward, what that area is actually going to look like once complete.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The intent is to align Crossroads and Hagee as much as possible, and I believe remove the center median so that left turns can be made out of Hagee. It would sort of defeat the purpose of extending Hagee if no left turns were involved there.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I'm actually very pleased to hear that. So I agree with Mr. Walsh. It just doesn't make sense if you can't make left turns there if it's a four-way intersection. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Moving on to the next. The Idlewild sanitary sewer, $3,486,000. Anyone? Moving on to the next. The King Street upgrade. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. Back when I was running for Ward 2 back, feels like a lifetime ago now with how this term has been, but I think it would have been 2018. It surprised me how every resident on King Street, when I was canvassing and spoke with, was very eager to see the urbanization of that road, knowing that Gilmore Lodge and all the other things were going in there, the amenities fronting the road. So I'm very pleased to see this. I know there's a development charge aspect to this as well, so the growth is paying for itself. I just, on behalf of the residents on King Street, I know it's going to be a tough getting through as the construction progresses with the houses and the subdivision and Gilmore Lodge going in there. But in the end, I think it's going to be worth it. So I'm very pleased to see this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Noyes, and then Councillor Lubberts.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I'm just commenting again on the timelines because I think Councillor Dubanow mentioned that the Gilmore Lodge, which is going to be a very, very large project, I see that's 2023, this construction, so I'm assuming that we're assuming that the majority of the construction, the heavy construction, will be completed on Gilmore Road before we start, because I would imagine King Street is going to be a main access point for all the construction vehicles.
Mr. Walsh?
The project is to coincide with the completion of Gilmore Lodge. So we're hoping that, as you say, most of the heavy construction is done. But just further to that, we would expect that a regional project would use regional roads for access to their project and not beat up King Street.
Well, they'll use Garrison Road, why wouldn't they?
I think, again, I think it'll see that Garrison Road's very busy. I would imagine King Street's going to see a fair amount of traffic.
Anything else? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just looking at where we're at with King Street, there's just some recent construction there, and do we not get some relief from the developers when they do development and get some payment for road degradation, I guess, is that what you call it? Degrading the roads? Is that factored in here?
Mr. Walsh?
No, we don't factor that into any of our budgets. It would be very hard to pin down certain damage on a road such as King Street, for example, where the road structure's been there for 30 years as it in the current form.
Oh, okay.
It's difficult.
Sure.
Your worship.
Yeah, the developer that Councillor Lubberts is referring to is going to be required to reconstruct part of Albany. And to the extent that development charges don't cover those costs, that will be the responsibility of the developer. So that's Albany in this area.
Anything further? Move on to the next one. The Nye Road upgrade. Any questions? And we'll move on to the next one. I'm sorry, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I'm going to bring this up, and there's two other roads, and I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Walsh about this. I think Nye Road, at least parts of it that we're upgrading, are they not tar and chip at this point? Some of it? And the same thing with the few of them out, Thunder Bay Road and Prospect Point Road.
Mr. Walsh?
It's coming up later.
Yes, I believe the councillor is correct. Nye Road in this section is a surface-treated road. Typically, when we upgrade a road, we do create a more resilient surface, and this is a perfect opportunity to convert it, as we're urbanizing it, into a hot mix asphalt road.
And I can appreciate that that we're upgrading these roads, but I would be amiss if I didn't comment that there's been a number of roads that I thought should have been upgraded, and the rationale was, particularly in Black Creek, the rationale was we're not going to upgrade the roads until all the roads are at a certain level. In other words, those roads that are gravel may get the first application of tar and chip. Like we would bring the roads up to a certain level before we would start upgrading. That's one of the reasons given why River Trail was not paved, but it was tar and chipped. And there's other roads I can mention that perhaps should have been paved and were tar and chipped because of we have to bring all the roads up to a certain standard before we start upgrading. Now I see that there's 3 roads that are going to be upgraded that I never heard any complaints about or any concerns about, except that there's more development happening off of Nye Road and I think Prospect Point too and Thunder Bay. So now these roads are being upgraded where the other urban areas where we're fixing those roads are not. So I just thought I had to mention it because I don't know how to explain it to the residents when I say, well, all the roads have to meet a certain level before we start upgrading. But obviously there's exceptions. Thank you.
Redekop.
Yeah, and I've got a few comments on that, and I'd be happy to be corrected by staff if possible. When roads are being reconstructed, which this is happening here, they're typically asphalted because then the base is created, the underground work has been done. When you're going into an area like Thunder Bay or parts of Crescent Park even, Douglastown, unless the road's being reconstructed and it's just the road being resurfaced, that's when they're using double surface treatment, particularly if there isn't an adequate base for the road. And that's what's happened in many areas that used to be Bertie Township, where there hasn't been an adequate base. But if the roads are being reconstructed, they're all being paved. I can't think of a road, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I can't think of a road that we have reconstructed where we've put in underground services or new storm sewers and simply tar and chipped the road. I don't believe that's the case. Maybe Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, you want to talk to us on it?
No, I think the mayor explained it perfectly. When we dig a road up completely, we put it back to a condition that maximizes its life cycle and minimizes its maintenance. When it's a simple resurfacing, it's more or less like for like.
Anybody else? Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, just some thoughts on if we're going to upgrade the road, we got a plan of subdivision on Nye Road, and then we got, is it Oak Ridge development on Ridge Road. Is that going to affect the condition of this road? Because especially Oak Ridge, I would think that they were going to either come off of Ridge Road, and there's going to be times when they're going to be coming off of Nye Road because they're putting in a roadway there right on Nye Road, an access point. So wouldn't their construction...
Not sure about that, but I know that there's some sewage work going on right now, but Mr. Walsh could probably...
I thought they were going to access off Nye Road as well.
I don't know. They would have had to have acquired property, and I don't think they were able to. Councillor Butler and I had met with the developer some time ago, or at least the original planner. I know there was some discussion about even accessing across someone else's property an easement to hook into the sewer system. And I don't know what happened with that, but I don't believe that there's an access point into Royal Oak off of Nye.
But even still, there's a plan of subdivision on Nye Road, and if we're going to be upgrading here, I don't want to be upgrading this year, and then a year from now, the developer comes along and says, okay, we're going to start construction, and then they're going to rip it all up to put their laterals and stuff in. So, what's the status of that subdivision? Where are they?
Mr. Walsh?
Sorry, is Oak Ridge to the north of Nye Road?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's Oak Ridge. That's another plan of subdivision, right?
Creekside Estates.
So Creekside.
Creekside,
and
yeah.
Creekside and Nye Road will be constructed coincidentally by the same contractor, more than likely. The subdivision to the south of Nye Road, Oak Ridges, I think would access that off Ridge Road if they're going soon.
Yeah, but when are they going to start construction in the Creekside?
That is planned for this year. Sorry, 2022 budget year.
2022?
Yeah.
Okay, so after they got all their infrastructure and stuff in, then the road would be done?
That's correct.
And all their laterals and everything will be in, so they don't have to dig up the road to get at it?
That's the plan.
Okay. All right, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Anything further? We'll move on to the next slide. The Prospect Point road upgrade. We'll move to the next one. The Thunder Bay Road upgrade. Councillor Dubanow and then Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking through everything here, I'm just very pleased to see that sidewalks are going to be included as part of this. But I did have one other question regarding these road upgrades in the Thunder Bay area. Through you, Mr. Chair, and perhaps Mr. Walsh can answer this, perhaps even Ms. Hanson or even Ms. Dolch, if it's better for them. Is there going to be any plan to facilitate perhaps cycle lanes or anything like that, even perhaps in the future? I'm not sure what the width of the road is and if the cross-section is going to facilitate that. I'm just curious because I think Thunder Bay Road, as well as going back to King, may have been included in our active transportation master plan as cycle routes, and I'm just wondering if we're planning ahead to actually have either painted cycle lanes or sharrows or something like that on the road. Just wondering if there's perhaps a staff member who can shed some insight on that.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we do reconstructions, Councillor Dubanow, we do look at the active transportation master plan to look at what amenities are required.
Pleased to hear that. Thank you very much.
Your Worship?
Yeah, what's happening with the, what I think was maybe anticipated to be a roundabout at Butler Drive or whatever it is, and Thunder Bay Road. Is there going to be a roundabout?
Yes, it's included in the write-up. It's not in the one you see in front of it, but in the big blue sheets here, it's noted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just looking at this map. I don't see Butler Drive coming or even Sunrise coming onto Thunder Bay Road. That just an error?
Staff is saving money by using older maps.
That saved money. There, Jonathan, we're good. All right, now, there was talk of sidewalks from Ridge Road to Bernard Beach. Where are we with that, with this, or does that come later and it doesn't affect this?
Mr. Walsh?
So in the project in front of you, sidewalks are contemplated on both sides of the road. Going to the east, the development in the southeast corner of Burley and Thunder Bay does include an upgrade, I believe, to Thunder Bay Road to an urban standard. Is that correct, Kira?
That is correct. It's to Cookville, just to Cook, not all the way to Bernard. That is another development charge project that we'll have to look at.
Did I hear the sidewalk's not going to go to Bernard Beach?
Goes to Cook.
To Cook.
Not at this time.
Oh, future it's going to.
Yes.
But is it this year, doing this road not going to be, when we do the sidewalk, it's not going to be affected, or you're doing the sidewalk at the same time?
Sidewalks is included as part of this project.
Okay, all right, okay.
Anyone else?
So it'll just dead end on each end until we get to the other parts?
Through you,
That's
Mr.
correct.
Chair, the section of sidewalk between Prospect and Ridge is complete as part of that
Yeah,
urbanization.
okay.
So we'll have sidewalk from Ridge to Burley in the short term, to Cook in the medium term, and to Bernard a little later.
And they'll be on the south side of Thunder Bay Road, all of them? Or both sides?
It's most likely it'll be on both sides of the road. This is a collector road. Merits sidewalks on both sides.
Okay, okay, thanks. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Maintenance work, order management systems. Comments or questions? We're at the maintenance work order. Yeah. Are you good with that? Good? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that, Councillor Lubberts. Move on to the next one. The guide rail replacements. To the next one. The road reconstruction program. We'll move on to the next one. The Ridge Road North intersection improvements. We'll move on to the next one. 2022 road resurfacing program. We'll move on to the next one. The bridges and culvert replacement. To the next one, which is 2023 bridge and culvert replacements as well. I take it. We'll move on to the next one. The Bar Avenue retaining wall. Move on to the next one. 2022 sidewalk repair program. Your worship.
When we tender this, this work, will we include money that we had from I think this year's budget that didn't get spent?
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, last year's budget did include a $100,000 special project. We have not identified an appropriate need for that. We're waiting generally for a financial plan to implement the active transportation master plan. That plan identifies priority sidewalks, missing links and such. I'll be frank, $100,000 for a sidewalk doesn't go very far.
Well, it doesn't go anywhere if it isn't spent.
You're absolutely correct.
The only reason I ask it is because we put it into the budget because we're trying to make sure that we've got a walkable community as well. And so it may not be as much as you require, but it's a start. So I hope that we do find a way to spend that and make sure that there are more sidewalks for people to walk on, particularly when we've got we're hoping that we're going to have increased use of the public transit system, which does still require people to walk to bus stops. And so, again, aside from the school walking webs and the public transit piece, hopefully we'll be able to spend that money. And if you need more, you can always come back and ask. Thank you.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I did have an opportunity, I was a bit concerned, but I am now relieved, about sidewalks in regards to on Stevensville Road. I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Walsh about the sidewalks on Stevensville Road, knowing that Stevensville Road, Regional Road, is going to be reconstructed, probably designed, I guess, next year, 2 years later, probably, the construction. And I didn't see anything in here or in the 10-year forecast of sidewalks for Stevensville Road. And if anybody goes down there, that's a main access from anybody from the north who's going to Bay Beach, and anybody going to Safari Niagara. That's the road they're carrying on. And there's no sidewalks from the railroad track to Bowen Road, and there's no sidewalks from the railroad track south to where to Safari or Tim Hortons or the mini mall, hopefully the doctor's office, the pharmacy, the bank. There's no sidewalks there, and you see daily people walking with their dogs, with their pushing carts and and buggies and things like that. The concern is that with all that traffic, there are some people who are very impatient, and what they're using is the shoulder of the road if they're not happy with the slow traffic to kind of cut around. I know one person has called me already this year about almost being hit by somebody who was stuck in traffic. So I was concerned I didn't see sidewalks for Stevensville Road, being a regional road, et cetera. But talking to Mr. Walsh, it is in there, but it's just not under sidewalks. It's in the year 2024 under Stevensville Road reconstruction. So I do hope that we remember that 50,000 is actually going to be going towards the sidewalks when that road is constructed. So, thank you.
Mr. Walsh, you will remember that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Your worship?
Yeah, just on that point, the region has a pretty sophisticated road design system now, so that when Stevensville Road is redesigned, the area that's going to be reconstructed, I have no doubt will include sidewalks. It'll include probably cycling lanes of some sort, and so it's something that the residents of Stevensville should really keep an eye on when the region is going through that, because those are comments that need to be heard and should be heard. But the region will be taking that into account, and Mr. Walsh undoubtedly will be working with them. My understanding was, though, that they would construct the sidewalk. We then just have to take care of it.
Mr. Chair, under the current memorandum of understanding between the region and the local municipalities, the locals are responsible for construction of sidewalks, whether it's replacement or new. It will be constructed under the region's umbrella in that project. We will be a contributor financially to it to achieve that.
And do we get a say in the design?
Yes, we will have a seat at the table.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything further, Your Worship? Nope. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll ask Mr. Walsh. Looking at the slide that we have here, we can see that there's lots of vegetation that encroaches over the sidewalk, and this is the case in a lot of places in Ward 5 that I know of, especially in the north part of Bay Beach, and then some sidewalks back in behind Tim Hortons and off of Ridgeway Road. So I'm wondering, when we go through these roads and put these sidewalks in, is it possible that we can completely remove the vegetation that's there? Because if we just cut this down 3-4 years from now, it'll just overgrow back over top of the sidewalk. Now, I know in Shirkston, on Shirkston Road, we did go in there. The brush was working its way over the road, and we just took the bush hog and we went in there with the bush hog and cut it down. But along here, I would prefer to see that we dig up this vegetation so that it's, you know, we got our buffer off the sidewalk, a meter or so. Is that possible?
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, much of the vegetation here is private that's overgrown. I'm not sure where the property line is on this particular picture. You'll probably see this picture again next year. We use it as a great example. But I think where it's achievable to trim back hedges and remove them if they're on the boulevard, we do that. Where it's a private bush that's overgrown the sidewalk, we try and work with the homeowner.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just, you know, when you look at this, you can see that the neighbors in the neighborhood, you put a sidewalk in there and they're gonna get to this point and then they're gonna end up on the road. Because when you get to the bush, nobody's gonna walk through it, so they'll go around it. And that's not good for the neighbors in the neighborhood. So, yeah, if the residents have to keep it back, but if it's possible to dig it up, I would prefer that we dig it up.
Anything further? Then we'll move on to the next slide. Storm sewer repairs. We'll move on to the next slide. Wastewater for Sunset Industrial Lands. Your worship?
This and the next two projects, are those projects that we could qualify for regional funding through their combined sewer overflow program?
Mr. Walsh?
More than likely, when we're reducing inflow and infiltration into the existing sewer system, it is a qualifying project.
So we will be seeking fund, we will make applications?
We always do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Move on to the, I'm sorry, Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment regarding this particular item. I know it seems pretty, benign. You're looking at just a sewer project, but this is laying the groundwork for hopefully an opportunity for some employment lands here in Fort Erie. And I'm particularly in favor of this. I know it doesn't seem like much. I mean, we have the cost here, but it could open the door to something much larger going forward if all the ducks line up the way we hope. So I'm very supportive of this, and I'm looking forward to seeing it happen.
Thank you. Any further comments? Then we'll move on to the next slide, which is the 2021 trenchless repairs. We'll move on to the next slide. See 2022 trenchless repairs. Any comments or questions on that? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Infrastructure leak detection hydrants. We'll move on to the next slide. The 2022 water meter replacement program. We'll move on to the next slide. Crystal Ridge roof replacement. We'll move on to the next slide. The EJ Freeland Center building repairs. Councillor Dubanow will have a conflict on this one. Everyone else, any comments? We'll move to the next slide. The Town Hall Foundation repair. Move on to the next slide. The Crystal Ridge rink pad lighting replacement. We'll move on to the next slide. The E.J. Freeland Center pool repairs. Councillor Dubanow has a conflict on this. won't be speaking on it or anything like that. So everybody else, moving on. Which,
We could vote on the two E.J. Freeland items
okay,
right now.
so we could, yeah, if you wish.
And then later
we can do that.
on, we can vote on them. We'll still have to segregate
So-
those two. We'll have to segregate those two when we get to the final numbers, though, and deal with them separately as well.
Okay, so we'll vote on the E.J. Freeland Building Center repairs. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Please note that Councillor Dubanow didn't vote. What's the second one, Your Worship?
It's another E.J. Freeland one. It's
And the E.J. Freeland pool repairs. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Please note that Councillor Dubanow did not vote on that issue. So we'll move on to the next one. The tennis club lighting upgrade. Then the next one. So Waverly Beach Trail reconstruction. Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to extend my appreciation to Mr. Jansen and also his worship earlier this evening discussing this issue. I was concerned if we proceeded with this as a budget item that it perhaps could prejudice us with the province and actually getting the disaster relief funding. After the conversation I had with Mr. Jansen as well as his worship's explanation earlier, I'm completely confident and comfortable supporting this. And one way or another, regardless of whether the funding comes from the municipality or whether the province does it through the disaster relief funding, I think this is important to reconstruct. I personally cycle and use that trail on a regular basis, and I've heard from so many individuals who've been very disappointed. That Halloween storm was a wicked storm like nothing I've seen in my life, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing this work done. Hopefully, I'll leave it in the hands of Mr. Walsh and his team, but hopefully we can beef up the shoreline a little as well, and hopefully do what we can to divert the water. I know that storm was something else, but with climate change being what it is, and with what we see happening in British Columbia right now, we're going to have to plan for these things, and I trust Mr. Walsh and his team are taking that into account, and looking forward to seeing this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up, Councillor Lubberts? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. During the last storm, when this here all got ripped up, I was down there, and previous to that, I was down there working with the Coastal Collaborative when we were doing our algae monitoring down there. But while I was there, we did take some pictures, and I'm hoping that during this here reconstruction, that staff can work with, I guess you would probably have to ask NPCA or the Ministry of Natural Resources, because we have a huge pile of old algae piled up on the east side, and I would like to see that removed. There was a pile of just concrete debris that was piled up near this here pile of algae. I would like to see that removed as well. And specifically, there's a hop tree near that algae. And we need to identify that hop tree and make sure that any construction crews that are in there stay away from the hop tree and its root system.
Anything further?
No, I just want to make sure Mr. Walsh
You're taking
or
notes,
Kira
Mr. Welch?
Dolch is aware of that, and then make note.
Yes, I've noted that.
Okay, thank you.
So we will move on to the next slide. The Bay Beach parking lot asphalt. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've been watching recently, there's a lot of advertising that I see on TV, and they talk about help us unflood Ontario. And when one of the things they talk about is permeable asphalt, and I'm wondering if we're considering that here at Bay Beach, so to alleviate drainage, to help drainage or whatever.
Mr.
Are we
Walsh?
thinking of that, or are we just going to go with a straight
Mr. Welsh?
boring asphalt?
Through you, Mr. Chair, right now the plan is straight boring asphalt. The permeable pavement requires quite a bit of substructure to accommodate the water that does infiltrate the system and into the subgrade. This budget does not account for that. This was a simple hot mix asphalt on here to improve the parking and further delineate the spots so that we could maximize revenue.
So I guess that's out of the question. So my next question is, years ago when I worked construction, there was and I don't know if they still use the asphalt, but there was an asphalt that we were putting on the 401 system. And that asphalt, the top layer, we put the base layer on, and then the top layer was a little coarser and porous, and it allowed the water to dissipate through the asphalt to the drainage. I don't know if they still use that asphalt anymore or not, but is that a possibility?
Mr. Walsh?
I think you've got the layers reversed. The open graded drainage layer, OGDL, is one of your bottom layers and keeps the water out of the asphalt so that you don't get potholes in it. The top is still as pervious as possible.
All right, yeah, that was a long time ago. So but is that possible? Since we got good drainage base, that's all sand there, right?
Again, that's not contemplated with the funding here. This is simply 90 millimeters of asphalt. There's not room in the 90 for that.
Okay. I tried.
Anything further, Councillor Lubberts? Okay, then we'll move on to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, just 1 second.
Yeah, no,
Your Worship.
I'm just thinking in terms of, you put down asphalt, that means there's going to be a drainage issue, which perhaps isn't as significant if there's double surface treatment. I don't know that. Maybe Mr. Walsh can comment on that.
Mr. Walsh?
Both surface systems seal the road. So there's theoretically the same amount of water shedding off, whether it's surface treatment or asphalt.
Okay, so we'd have to go to something that's clearly permeable, which isn't being proposed and isn't in existence now, correct?
Mr. Walsh?
There are permeable pavements out there.
Yeah.
We haven't looked into them in town here yet.
Right, no, what I'm saying is it's not permeable now, and we're not proposing that a new surface would be permeable.
Correct.
Should we?
I think in the future it's something we should look into.
How far into the future would it be prudent to do that when we're looking at floods and landslides and unbelievable heat in the same area? And we're just, the photograph, a couple of photos before this showed what the lake can do to 8x4, 6-inch pieces of concrete. So I'm just wondering whether, I don't know what the cost implications would be, but I'm wondering whether we shouldn't be more tuned in, because we're a municipality that is right on the lake, and we're susceptible to, particularly in this area, we would be susceptible to climate extremes. Don't know what the cost would be. It's something, though, that I think we're going to have to contemplate, and our residents are going to have to come to the realization that in order for us to have sustainable infrastructure, we're going to have to take into account the resiliency aspects of it. Have we, if I might, Chair, have we commissioned a report for council where we get some advice from staff on resilience of our infrastructure?
Mr. Walsh?
Are you asking for a report, or do you want me to comment?
No, I'm just asking if we've done that. I don't recall that we have, but we make you folks do so many reports, maybe we did.
Not specifically on that, but when we design projects now, climate change is a legislated factor that we look into. In my opinion right now, climate change is more storms of higher intensity.
Yeah. So perhaps, Chair, this is a discussion that could be had in the Infrastructure Services Subdivision Subcommittee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before you Councillor Lubberts, Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to touch on what the mayor just mentioned with regard to the type of surface for the parking lot, I recall, I think over in Buffalo perhaps, they've explored the idea of what they call green parking surfaces. So they put down almost like a permeable layer, and they allow grass to go through it, and it maintains it. And the layer that they put down that they allow grass to grow through is what prevents, ruts and people getting stuck when it's wet and stuff like that. Certainly, I'm not asking for anything like that to be done on this parking lot, and I don't know the details of what's appropriate and what isn't. But just to touch on what the mayor mentioned, I'm wondering if, going back to the issue of sustainability and climate change, if that's something, if appropriate, for municipal parking lots at some point in the future, that we perhaps investigate the idea of the green parking lots. I know that there'd be a maintenance aspect to it to ensure whatever grass and whatever grows through is, maintained and well taken care of. But I think simply from a perspective of sustainability, you're the issue of CO2, you're absorbing that with plants. I could go on and on. I'm just putting that bug in Mr. Walsh's ear. If it's appropriate, this might be something to look into. I don't even know if it is appropriate or not for anything that we have here, but it's just a thought going back to that discussion, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. So you noted that, Mr. Walsh. Good to go. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Callie, I just remembered watching a program, I believe it might have even been Nova, but they were talking about reflection of the sun rays coming off of dark surfaces, and they're looking into maybe changing the color of asphalt. Is there any products out there that can help us with this, and maybe instead of having a black parking lot, we can have a white one or a green one?
Mr. Walsh?
I think a white one would be concrete.
No, too expensive.
I'm not familiar with, I'm familiar with colored concrete or colored asphalt, but it's more decorative than anything.
Yeah. Well, obviously, they haven't got to that point yet, right? But it would be nice if we got some information on that, maybe start doing a few projects in Fort Erie, because each little bit will help.
So during the next infrastructure meeting, you have that discussion? That'd be perfect. We can move on to the next slide. The McAfee Cemetery new columbarium purchase. The next slide. Another McAfee columbarium replacement. Councillor Lubberts?
When do we determine that we need a columbarium in either cemetery? Does it go by what's the space that's left, or do we just, when it's full, we get a new one?
Through you,
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair. When we get to about 80 or 85% full, we plan for a new one.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So we'll move on to the next slide, which is the building bylaw inspection vehicle. Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. This is actually just a comment on all the fleet purchases, and I'm in favor of all of them, but I'm just wondering, have we investigated anything about electric vehicles? And I know there's an infrastructure requirement in regards to charging stations and everything else, but have we considered, because we're replacing every year a number of vehicles, have we started to think down that lines whether any electrical or hybrids would suit our needs?
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We haven't looked into electrical vehicles. There's still limited availability out there at significant cost, as well as the charging infrastructure, as you note. We did have a few hybrid vehicles a few years ago, and it was early in the hybrid phase, and at that time they weren't economically advantageous compared to a straight gasoline vehicle. More money, more maintenance. They were heavier, so they actually used more fuel. So we've gone back to straight gas vehicles for our light fleet right now. But we're always looking for ways to improve the operation of our fleet and make it cheaper to run in the long run.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next slide. 2022 parts pickup truck with plow. We'll move on to the next slide. 2022 roads pickup truck. Councillor Lubberts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're getting back and forth to different ones, but just looking at the trucks in general. The parks pickup truck with a plow and the roads pickup truck, it doesn't show a plow, and it's the same price. Why wouldn't we buy two with a plow for the same price? Two of them at $46,000 with a plow, and eliminate the one without the plow.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we purchase vehicles based on need. The numbers quoted are budgetary in nature, and as we've identified through this process tonight several times, when we have money left over, it's returned to the reserves. So if one's cheaper than the other, the extra money does go back. But directly to your question, we simply don't need another pickup truck with the plow equipment on it. It does reduce economics and it increases fuel consumption.
Good.
I'm good with that answer.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next slide. 2022 roads tandem dump plow. There you go. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. The 2022 utilities pickup truck. Yeah, the next slide. Is that it? Mr. Treasurer, has anything changed on this that I should be, okay, just get it 1 second.
Yeah, I can summarize that for you here. We have, would be 3 changes to the preliminary amount. One is to add $3 million from the general amount. And then if we were to approve separately the 2 projects, EJFB 22 for $300,000 and EJFP 22 for $365,000, the preliminary amount would then become $9,801,500. And the general amount would become $12,910,697.
So, first one is this one. Two down. Only two.
Yep.
Yeah, I just had a question. I was listening to Mr. Jansen providing you those numbers. Did that include the $200,000 that we put into the, I don't think it did.
No, you are correct. Yeah, we would want to add the $200,000 to the preliminary amount, so that would then become $10,001,500.
$10 million. How much? 10 million what?
$10,001,500. And that 200,000 was for SPSP 22.
Just let me see.
Maybe I can summarize here.
So I wonder if we could just clarify that again, Mr. Jansen. You've got a total of $10,001,500, and that includes the $200,000, and that also includes the E.J. Freeland numbers?
No, that excludes those two.
Okay.
If we, I think we had determined we would vote on those separately.
Yep.
So then we have four approvals. The preliminary capital budget of $10,001,500. The general approval of $12,910,697. Then we would have the EJ Freeland project EJFP 22 for $365,000 and project EJFB 22 for $300,000.
The two E.J. Freeland, though, amounts, those are suggested to be part of the preliminary
That's correct.
capital
Yes.
budget. Okay. 10 million.
The EJF B22 first for 300,000. Comments or questions? No. All in favor?
Chair?
Oh, go ahead.
And we should designate that that's part of the preliminary budget.
So that is part of the preliminary budget. All in favor? Carried. And EJFP 22 is also up for 365,000 for, which is part of the preliminary budget as well. All in favor? Carried.
That's part of the next resolution. Were were these moved, Madam Chair? Okay, so then I'll move the first two, which relate to the E.J. Freeland. So technically, we're going to have to vote on that again. Did we have a mover for the E.J. Freeland ones right now?
No,
When
we
just
were
voted
dealing
on
with them separately as within.
Right, but did we have a mover on that?
No, but we didn't have a mover on the very first recommendation. This one, just the whole report.
Okay, so that's already on the floor.
No, it wasn't moved. You were
Okay,
just going
okay,
through the
okay.
items.
So then I'll move, whatever needs to be moved, I'll move. But it seems to me we need to move those two E.J. Freeland reports that we just voted on and vote on them again. I think we can,
We can do that, yes.
I
but
think
we
that they
do-
need to be moved. I think they can be moved together because we have one counselor that has a conflict.
Yes.
And then we can vote on them, and then we go to the total balance, which is 10 million, whatever. Somebody needs to move that. Yeah, somebody needs to move that. Yeah,
But if we can go back one step,
yeah.
the
So let's,
original report was not moved onto the floor.
the total report,
yeah.
okay. So then I will move the report itself, and then we'll vote on the components separately. Okay, so I've moved the whole report. So Madam Clerk, would you suggest that we then re-vote on the E.J. Freeland ones? Yeah,
That's what you
okay.
would like, yes.
So I'll move the two E.J. Freeland reports, E.J. FB 22, one for 300,000, one for 365,000.
So all in favor? Carried.
And then, Chair, I will move that as part of the preliminary budget, we approve $10,001,500 and submit the bylaw to council.
All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried.
Want me to keep going?
Yep, might as well.
Then I move that we approve the balance of the 2022 capital budget of $12,910,697 as per Appendix 2 of the report, and move it forward for consideration at the bylaw stage in February.
All in favor? Carried.
And then I think, Chair, we also have to move, do we have to move the amortization, or is that already on the floor, Madam Chair? On the floor, okay. And we just need to vote on it.
So back to you then. Oh,
I think the amendment was included in the 10 million. 10 million amount. Yeah. So then I think all we need to do is approve the exclusion of the amortization. We need to vote on that.
okay, so you want to move that, Your Worship? All in favor? We're voting on that. Council approves the exclusion of amortization from the 2022 operating budget. It's on the back of the pink page. Okay, all in favor?
Better late than never.
Carried. So I guess it's back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councilor McDermott. And again, you've done an excellent job navigating us through millions of dollars of expenditures. And I want to thank all of council as well as staff for the time and energy that they've put into this. It's a very thoughtful capital budget, and one that really, I think, addresses a lot of the community's needs. So the next meeting is Wednesday, December the 8th, when we'll deal with the water and wastewater operating budget and fees analysis. And then we'll do a meeting on February the 2nd, library assessment analysis and general levy operating. So at this stage of the game, Councillor Dubanow, I would ask you to move that we adjourn.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to move that Council and Budget Committee adjourns at 8:54 PM.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.